Welcome back to more fun with Java. Last time we learned about Model View Controller, which remember is not a technical requirement for your stuff to work, but it is a good guideline to follow, kind of like things like being nice to each other or the attendance policy. Anyway, let's start a new project here. I'm going to call it, because we're going to use an example, we're going to make a student, I guess, program. So let's just call it student. And I'm going to actually create the main class here and call it student controller. Remember, the controller is the piece that controls both the model, the data, and the view, what the user sees. So we'll hit finish, and then next year my computer will actually finish creating it. Yay. Alright, now this is a good analog for your next assignment, which you'll start after this tutorial, which is to create a little bit more fleshed out version of an MVC program. But we're only going to do some very basic functionality in this one. We're not going to do much on screen, but we will set everything up the way that you'd expect it to be. So here's our lovely student controller class. Now remember, we need both a model and a view for each object, and we'll call students objects in this in this program, not to objectify anyone. Please don't be mad at me. So we need to make a new file. So the first thing we'll do is we'll make a JFrame to have the view, and I'm actually going to call it student view. And we also need a model. We're not taking pictures, don't worry. I don't think many of us would qualify for that job description anyway. And we'll call that one student model. So we have our model, our view, and our controller. Alright, so what I usually do is I kind of set up my data structures first in my model. So we're just going to organize our students in. Let's just give them two variables here. Let's give them a name. So we'll say string name, and we'll also give them, I don't know. How about we just give them a first name and a last name for now? We can always change this later, and I'd hope that you would. All right. So we set up the variables for student model. First name and last name. Now what you usually have to do when you have a model is you have to implement something called the constructor, which is not really hard. You just, inside the class declaration, you type public student model, and you actually write it as if it's a function. Okay. So what this is going to do is this is going to set, basically it's called the constructor. So this is the constructor, sets initial values of the class variables. You can actually include arguments in the constructor, which are good ideas, because it allows you from your controller to specify what initial properties the student is going to have. So we can specify a string as the first argument and a string as the last argument of first and last name. And then we could say first name is going to be equal to that string provided, and the last name is going to be equal to the last name provided. And that's all we really need to do. So in our model, we've set that the students are going to have a first name, a last name, and the constructor is going to allow us to specify both those first names and last names. And we could extend this. For example, we could check, we could check to see if first name or last name existed, and then if they didn't, make them up. So, we could be like, if, I don't know, we don't have to spend time on it because they're going to exist, but you could be like, if the length of fn is 0, first name is equal to iron, and then for the last name it could be man, as in Iron Man. Okay, anyway. Okay, so let's go back to our controller. So in our controller, what we need to do is we need to specify that every time we create a student, we want to create it with the student model class. So if you go back to your student controller, and in your thingamajig here, you can specify the variables for your model and your view. For example, if you type remember, typing a string variable, string, here's a string, right? That's how you specify a string variable. Specifying classes is the same way. You just type in the name of the class, so student model, and then its name, model, and then we say equals, and this is where we use the constructor, so you could say new student model. Remember how we had arguments in that constructor, so we need to put arguments in the class declaration here. And we could have this create a new student, and let's call it, we'll stick to the Marvel analogy, or the superhero analogy. I'm privy to Batman. He is my hero.
Ooh, fancy.
So this is one way to...
That stuff is like up here, so like when I came in, Drew asked me if I'm...
This stuff I can definitely use.
So Drew's gonna have to put it into storage.
This I can use.
This is... Oops, sorry.
Sorry, man, if we talk or we...
I had to move because people needed the office. Anyway, so we now have a way to create our model containing a first and a last name. Now we also need to specify what's going to go on in our view. And 1 second. Time I go to a new office, there are people in there. Reminds me. I'm hiding in the computer lab. Reminds me of my entire high school life. Okay, just kidding. All right, finally. So we need to figure out what's going on in our view. So we don't want anything too complicated for the purposes of this tutorial to happen in our view. I basically just wanted to display some information about the student. So let's go over here, and what we want to do is we want to, well, we could do a couple different things here, but for the sake of purpose, let's just drag a label first. So we need a couple labels. We need this label, okay, and what I want to do is I want this label to be the first name. So let's see if I remember how to do this. Code, variable name, first name label. There it is. And this one should be last name label. Okay, let's also get a button going on here. And let's have this button, what should we want? We'll have this button create a new name or something like that. Or, I don't know, we'll have it create a new name. So we'll call this button create new student button. And it's going to have to handle an event. There we go. And its text we're going to have to change because we don't want it to have a J button on the front there. That doesn't really make sense. If I could only find how to change the text. Oh boy. There is a way. It is possible. Where are you? No. 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 Really? Accessible name? No. Okay, well this is fun. Maybe it's under the code section. I don't know. I forgot. Sad. Oh, there it is. Okay. Let's not tell anyone about that. Okay. Alright, so there we go. So now we have our screen laid out, very basic. Let's go into our source code. So here we have the variable declarations that you guys are now familiar with, which is very good. We also have the button handler up here. Okay. Now remember, we don't want to create new models from our view class. Now again, this is not a technical requirement for your code for it to work, but if you start doing this, you're going to get classes that are huge, that do too many things, and it doesn't really make sense. If you're going to buy into MVC, you want to stick to it. And it is the industry standard, so we are going to stick to it. So what our new button action should really do is it should tell our controller to create a new student. So we want to tell controller to create new student. Okay, we'll look into we want it to create and display new student information. So we'll look into how to do that in a little bit. Let's go over here though. So in our student controller, we also need to create a model. Right? So we can do this the same way that we did, or in our student controller we also need to create a view, and we can handle what happens there in the same way that our constructor was used in the model. So here's public student view, which is good. And let's have this take some arguments as well. Okay, or in fact, better yet, let's write a. How about this? Instead of that, let's write a method that allows us to update the screen. So we're gonna create a new method, and it's got to be public static, and it's gonna not return anything. And we want it to accept a string for the first name and a string for the last name. Okay. And what this is going to do, theoretically, is, we'll get to that in a second, is it's going to set the text of the labels to be first name and last name. So we have first name label dot set text first name, last name label dot set text last name. And I think the reason why this is not working is it just needs to be after the declarations. Let's see, or maybe in here. Actually, not sure. No. Interesting, something's going on. Don't know what it is. My computer is acting up. Why is everything gray? Something's up. It's very strange. Maybe the gray is stuff we're not supposed to change? I guess not. Okay, that's awkward. Alright, well, let's see if we can just paste it up here. Yeah, that's not... Oh, duh, because we didn't give it a name. Okay, that's awkward. Oh boy. We do need to give this a name. We'll call it update view, or update screen. There we go. Alright. Pretty terrible. And we'll just call this, and get rid of that static there. There you go. So now we have a new method called update screen that doesn't return anything. That's what this void means, and that's public, which means that we can access it or call it from outside of this specific code. So that's good. All right. So in our student controller, what we can do is we can create this new student view and call it view equals new student view. And this time, instead of using the constructor to do things in the student view, we're actually going to say view.update screen. Which it doesn't seem to be getting. Oh, right, it needs these. So what we want to pass into it is we want to pass information from the model. So we say the first name is going to be model dot first name. Okay, because first name is a property on model, and we can say the second argument is model dot last name. Right, so we're using our data as arguments in our method in our view, and we're using the controller as kind of like a middleman between these. That's how model view controller should work, and it's when it's at its best. Okay. All right, so let's kind of run this to make sure that it actually does work before we implement the button. I think it should be fine, but you know me. It might work eventually. Oh, it's taking its sweet time. Wow, it's really taking its sweet time. What is going on? Come on, Java. Java. I wonder if the guy who invented Java, or Java, called it Java. This seems like a really good opportunity to start telling bad jokes. I don't know any bad jokes, though. Oh, man. Okay, computer. Any day now. Any day. It looks like nothing's happening. Should I stop it? What's going on? I feel like I feel like something's wrong. I don't know what it is though. Okay, well I am gonna stop this. Hold on a sec. Thing, which is that we have to just tell the JFrame class that we created, the view, we have to tell it to be visible on the screen. You do that by doing view.setVisibleTrue. Okay, so if you do that and then you run it, you will certainly get Bruce Wayne. Right now, of course, the button doesn't actually do anything yet, so let's go ahead and fix that up. We'll go back into our student, where was it? Our student view class, and we need to implement this button handler. Right, so remember what our button handler needs to do. It needs to tell the controller to create a new student and display that new student's information. Okay. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this. We're just going to do it the quick and easy way so I can show you the process of sending a message back to your controller, having the controller do something, and then sending information back to the view. Okay, but there's a lot of different ways to do this. So the first thing we have to do is tell the controller to create and display a new student's information. So what we probably need to do is we need to create a new method that says that. Okay, so we need to say public void. It's not going to return anything. Well, it could return something, but we'll leave it without that for now. And we'll call this method create new student. Okay. Okay, so we can say, and this is bad for memory purposes, but again, we're just learning here. We're not looking at memory just yet. So we'll say new student or student model. New student model equals new model. And let's go ahead and, again, we'd probably, if this was a real program, we'd have these be random names, or maybe we'd select them out of an array or a database. But Bruce Wayne, we didn't like Bruce Wayne, so let's try Bruce Banner. I'm privy to the Hulk. Okay, so that sounds good. So we got the new student model. Now you might be asking yourself, all right, well, how do we send information back to that view? Well, it looks like what we did here is we declared student view as not so much a class variable. Okay, we probably wanted to do that. We probably wanted it to be a class variable. So if we take the student view, this line, and we break it up and we say student view, right? And we set it up as a class variable. We can say that this is going to be a private class variable, so that nothing else can access it but this class. Now instead of this line, we can just say view equals new student view. Oh, private static. There you go. That way, down here, we can reference the same view that sent us the information. We could say view.updateScreen. And similarly to how we did it up here, we could say new student model dot first name. Because remember, that first name property will be on every instance of the model of the student model class. New student model dot last name. All right, so that's how this will create a new student, which is great. We don't need to do the set visible true because it's already visible, so we don't need to do that again. We don't need to create a new student view either because we've already done that. So we just need to tell it to update the screen. Very simple. Okay, so that's how we're going to receive a message and then send information back to the view. But how do we from the view tell the controller to send a message. Okay, that's the next part. Is a new property that you guys haven't learned called the superclass. So when in our controller we created a model and a view in this class. That means that the student controller is the superclass of student view and student model. It's like kind of like in HTML where you have, you know, a pen child. It's like student view and student model are children of student controller. Okay, so we can actually access methods in superclasses provided that they're public and they're publicly available, which we did here, by using super dot create new student. Didn't seem to work. Must be missing something. Hold on. Is you do something called adding an event listener from the controller to the view. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back into our view, and notice how we have our button handling method here, which was automatically created for us by adding the button to the design screen. So what we actually want to do is we want to